It's Thursday morning in Lagos. Good morning, everyone. Compliments of the season to you and welcome to the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Well, Nigeria now has a spending plan for the new year, and this is coming after Mr. President signed the 2020 Appropriation Bill into law. The figure is 10.59 trillion naira, tagged budget of sustained growth and job creation. Many believe this is Mr. President's birthday present to the nation because it's perhaps the first time since 1999 that the country will be returning to the January to December budget cycle. What's the implication of this, and how much should Nigerians expect from this particular budget? I'm joined this morning by stockbroker and financial analyst Muktar Mohammed. Good morning and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Compliment of the season.
Johnson Chukwu is here, CEO Carry Asset Management Limited. He's an economist as well as a financial analyst. Glad to have you come.
My pleasure.
So having a normal financial year, they say, will assist for proper planning and execution of the annual budget. Just how big is the news that we have returned to the January-December cycle?
You know, there are two major things that has happened with this return of the calendar to the calendar year. One of which, it takes out the burden of uncertainty associated with the delay in signing the budget. The budget is the fiscal tool that defines the economic direction of the country. And for economic managers, for business managers, they look up to the federal government to set the tune, to define the direction. So when the budget is not signed, it leaves a lot of suspense for business managers. They tend to sit on the fence to wait for the economic direction of the country. So now that we have a budget that will run from January, it simply means every business manager will have to plan to fit into the national budget. And that for me is a very critical factor of the signing of the budget. The second factor, it gives the government enough headroom to start the implementation of the capital expenditure component. Because if you look at the seasonal restrictions we have in the country, you have dry season that runs from maybe October to April, and then you have the rainy season that takes up from May to September. Most times we've signed the budget around May, June, which leaves the government with minimal opportunities to engage in fiscal infrastructure development. So we're going to eliminate that. What the government has to contend with now is that can they generate the revenue that will support the implementation of the budget.
Exactly the point I wanted to make, that the budget is a proposed spending plan, and we know how budgets have performed in the past. Do the private sector have anything to benefit from returning the budget cycle to January to December?
Well, it depends on which side of the device you are in the private sector. Every private sector company has their own year, and some can say you do their own January, some December, some September, some October. It all depends on which device you are. But like he said, it's good for proper planning if we can hit the ground running. But I don't see that happening because even the president has said that he will have to send back the budgets to them. So definitely. So I think what they just wanted to achieve was let's see how we can go to January, December. And for me, it's not about the year that we do it. It's about what we're able to come out with. How implementable are these budgets? How is it going to benefit Nigerians? The United States of America does not run a budget of January to December. They run September, and it's not how beneficial it's to your economy that really matters. Not because we have to come back to January. It's tradition, as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to go to the traditional way of saying, oh, you have to plan for January. Like somebody rightly put it, oh, let's start with a New Year resolution, New Year, whatever. For me, the bottom line is how beneficial is this budget to the Nigerian people? How implementable is this budget? If Mr. President is saying, look, we have to take back the budget, then there's a lot of, that means there's still a lot to be done. He just wanted to make sure that we get to that January, December year, and most likely again we may still get to the point whereby some project will not even see the light of the day till maybe between second or third quarter of the year.
Another question would be whether what Muktar calls tradition will be sustainable. It took the National Assembly 2 months to pass this budget. The 8th Assembly took about 6 months thereabout. Some say the reason why we're talking about this is the kind of relationship that currently exists between the executive and the legislature. But the president, as Muktar mentioned earlier, will request for environment. Help us understand what this means, because they're talking about the adjustments that the lawmakers have made in this planning document.
Okay, let's start by the environment you refer to. Environment means is a process of transferring from one budgetary allocation head, from one head of expenditure to another head. Take, for instance, you have an amount you have budgeted for. to spend in education or in healthcare, and you want to move it from healthcare to works. So that's the process of verment. So it simply means a process that requires the president to get the consent of the National Assembly to move expense heads from one area which the government considers are not critical to another area that it considers of importance to the society. So that's basically what the president is referring to. So we are going to do some verment. And of course, you know that the budget was modified by the National Assembly. The initial budget that was sent to the National Assembly was 10.3 trillion naira. Now what came out was 10.594 trillion naira. So there was an increase of 264 billion naira in the budget. And the National Assembly also increased the budget benchmark from $55 to $57. So, but the most important thing is the increase in amount allocated and which expense heads benefited from that increment. We saw also some reductions. Take, for instance, the issue of recurrent expenditure. It was reduced from 4.88 trillion naira to 4.84 trillion naira. And you had some increments as well. So basically, the government will look at those adjustments. Do they fit into our overall economic plan? So would the adjustment affect some of the critical projects we want to implement? And or the areas that we are marked up, do they have, take for instance the issue of debt service. It was moved to 2.73 trillion naira from 2.45 trillion naira. So the question is that additional increment, is it to reflect the additional borrowing when the government is saying we want to restructure our debt so that we have a dominance of foreign debt and less of local debt, that we should want to moderate our cost of borrowing? There are several things that the government could actually look and say, look, this doesn't fit exactly into our plan. So you need to give us the consent to move what has been budgeted from one item, one expense head, to another expense head.
Help us understand what the process of requesting for verment is all about, because already the president has signed this particular document. Does this in any way has the potential of impacting negatively on the implementation? Because if the National Assembly added the funds, how do you go back to them and say what you have done is wrong? You
see, the challenge is we just use language to confuse ourselves in this country rather than doing the right thing. We still have these issues, whether whose power it is to either the National Assembly to increase the budget or the executive, because the executive seems, we just wanted you to just go through the budget and see what we want to do. But the National Assembly say they have the power to either increase the budget. Does the power lie in them to increase the budget or not? These are things that the former regime wanted to take the National Assembly to court to resolve these issues. And at the end of the day, those issues were not resolved. And that's why we keep having these challenges, because we've not been able to resolve those issues. In whose power is it? Is it in the power of the National Assembly to increase the budget benchmark? Is it in the power of the National Assembly to add projects into the budget that were not even planned by the executive? You see, executive come out with projects based on resources. National Assembly comes out with projects based on the people they think they are representing, what the people they think they're representing needs. So they need to look at that. And when you look at some of these projects now, the ones that were included by the National Assembly, they've not been, like we say, if you say road construction, or there's not been an engineering drawing to that side. They've not been even located the site that this project will be sited, and yet it's in the budget. So maybe the executive is looking at it this way, like, look, we didn't make provision for this, and sometimes you see them move. Let me give an instance for FCT. FCT has a budget allocation of about 61 billion. And out of that 61 billion, 37 billion will be allocated to the National Assembly alone for the renovation of the National Assembly alone. And that will affect other projects. Maybe they're beginning to look at those issues and say, look, we need to come back to the table. We need to look at this issue. Remember the other time we had an issue whereby sometimes the legislator even go as far as putting state project, local government project in federal budget. So I'm sure most of those things the president must have looked at. And I'm sure that because of the urgency of making it, let it not be the president that did not sign it. So the president said, okay, it shouldn't be that I'm not the one that signed it. So let me just sign it, then I'll come back to it.
And then I'll return to this.
I think that's a gentleman agreement.
Okay.
They have a good working relationship, which is good. Which is good for the Nigerian people, like they keep telling us. But when it comes to budget, this is the fastest budget thus far that have been passed by the National Assembly. Within 2 months, the budget has been passed. And like you rightly said, will this process be sustainable over time? Will we see a National Assembly that will come and continue to pass the budget in 2 months? Because from all indication, from all what we've seen, we did not get the kind of thorough vetting of this budget that we normally get before.
We're told there's a thin line between a romantic relationship between the National Assembly and executive, and the National Assembly being a rubber stamp, to the executive actually. But what we have seen now is, for the first time, we're not hearing issues about pardon that we had last year. But some are saying perhaps that word has been, replaced with increase, because the National Assembly actually increased this budget from 10.3 trillion naira to 10.5 trillion. There are reactions already. Some are saying that these are issues that we've talked about before. Some activists have identified this addition as frivolous. Some call it self-enrichment projects that have been smuggled into the budget by the federal lawmakers. So the new projects are expected to cost Nigeria 264 billion naira. How do you see all of this play out, especially as it impacts on the implementation of this budget?
My approach to it is that if you want to look at that increment, you need to look at the heads that benefited from that increment. I do not think all the heads are new projects that were started by the National Assembly. A number of them are projects where the National Assembly felt that the process of implementation should be fastened. There is a 25 billion provision for the EGO I project in Abuja, which is the National Security Advisors project. If you look at some of the expense, there was an increase in the amount allocated to Works Ministry. And what they did was, some of the projects being implemented in Works Ministry, what they did was increase the amount originally allocated to them to say you need to fast track that process. Take, for instance, the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road. Assuming, I don't have exact figure that was allocated initially, assuming 10 billion was allocated to it, and National Assembly came to say, look, if you allocate 10 billion annually, and the project is a 200 billion project, if it take us 20 years to complete, why don't we do 50 billion so that we take us 4 years to complete it? So that's part of those adjustments. We have to fast track existing projects so that people will actually begin to get value for that project. So it's not just as simple as padding. But if you use the word padding, padding simply means you have added additional layers to an existing layer, and then some of those layers are not of any benefit, they are non-beneficial. So it may not be as simple as that. But for me, what is of greatest concern to me is that, does the government have the capacity to generate the revenue necessary to fund
We're going to get there. Let us quickly turn our attention to the breakdown of this budget. Recurrent expenditure, 4.8 trillion naira. That's about 46% of the total budget. Capital expenditure, 2.4 trillion. Debt servicing, 2.7. And fiscal deficit, 2.8. So I'm not as expert as you guys, but I understand that the fiscal deficit is a shortfall from government income compared to its spending. Are we again spending beyond our means?
It has always been like that. We've spent beyond our means. It has always been like that. But the challenge, everybody have said no. Nobody is saying the government cannot spend based on budget estimate. Maybe you estimate something. That's why it's called a budget. It's budget estimated. So sometimes there could be other revenue that will come in from government that will have cushioning effect on those 2-point-something trillion deficit. And also sometimes there could be no revenue coming. Remember that this budget, as far as I'm concerned, at the beginning, at the preparation still, we started getting it wrong in terms of the preparation of the budget, because if you look at the estimate they were expecting, especially from tax, the tax angle, it was estimated that would make so and 1-point-something trillion, and that was based on their estimation. And when it comes to tax, it's neither here nor there, because it all depends on how much revenue those companies are making to make, how much revenue the individuals are making. So they just assume that they could make that. They could make less than that, and that could increase the deficit. You look at the oil benchmark at that time, the oil benchmark was put at $55 per barrel. They have moved it to 57. Even at $55 per barrel, as far as I was concerned, was even too high expectation, because that means we are not even thinking of building our reserve in the sovereign wealth fund to be able to take other opportunities, especially when there's a shock in the crude oil market. So when you look at that and you look at debt servicing, it's even more than capital project. You look at recurrent expenditures, even more than capital project, even if the National Assembly try to readjust it. And you ask yourself, who are these people that are benefiting for the recurrent expenditure? How many percentage of them are Nigeria? I mean, percentage to the general Nigeria, you realize they are not even up to 10%. So when you look at all this, you put it in context, you said, it's more or less like you are biting more than you can chew. You're beginning to say, look, we don't have that much resources, but we believe, like the normal belief, we have faith that somewhere, something will happen and we'll be able to pay off those things. And again, we have to borrow, which to me, I don't see anything bad with borrowing, because in any economy, you have to borrow. Even in a company, that's why companies sometimes borrow money to expand their operational basis, but there must be sincere needs for borrowing, and there must be sincere need for company expansion.
Talking about borrowing, Mr. President has returned the 2016-2018 extra borrowing plan to the National Assembly, and recently the Senate President said that they are possibly going to pass that bill and give him a nod to go ahead to borrow it. That has raised a lot of dust, because Shehu Sani recently tweeted about Nigeria's external debt in 2015 being $10.32 billion. According to him, it escalated to $22 billion in the second quarter of this year. That's 114%. The Debt Management Office is saying that Nigeria's debt stock is currently at $81.27 billion. Now, we're planning to add $30 billion to it. I didn't do much of maths in school, but that's like over 10 trillion naira, almost the size of this particular budget. Should we borrow that much?
Okay, Nifemi, let me take you to my own perspective on the issue of borrowing, or the borrowing plan that the President submitted to the National Assembly. In the first place, the borrowing plan is a 2016-2018 borrowing plan. We are at the end of 2019. And basically, you're now referring to a 2020 borrowing plan, because you can't even borrow it this year. So the first question I asked myself, should we present a 2016 borrowing plan in 2020? Because the simple reason why we have to ask that question is our financial position has changed drastically between 2016 and 2020. Take, for instance, the issue of debt. Total national debt in 2016 was 12.6 trillion naira. Total external debt was $10.72 billion. As at the end of 2018, our total national debt was 25.7 trillion naira, an increase of 13.1 trillion naira. Our external debt had grown from 10.7 trillion naira to 27.1 trillion naira, from $10.7 billion to $27.1 billion. So what does that tell you? We had borrowed about $16.4 billion between the time when we made that presentation and now. So do you really need another 30 billion? When you requested for 30 billion, it was turned down. Along the line, you have borrowed about 16 billion.
So you might not need up to that.
Should you represent a 30 billion, or should you now look at your current situation and decide what you should borrow? Take, for instance, debt service. In 2015, at the end of 2015, our debt service was 1.08 trillion naira. Our total revenue was 3.2 trillion naira. At the end of last year, 2018, our debt service had grown to 2.24 trillion naira. Our total federal government revenue was 3.86 trillion naira. It had grown from just 33% of our total revenue, debt service, to 58% of our total revenue. Your debt to GDP was $18% when you made that presentation. It has grown to 35% debt to GDP at the end of business last year. So, given that your condition has changed drastically, the question becomes, do you still have the capacity to borrow as much as you had in 2016? That's the starting point. Then you now ask, before you go to what are those projects we want to implement with this borrowing? Can they be better funded through other sources? I mentioned an instance. TVC is a private station. TVC does not need to go to the public purse to borrow money to expand, to digitalize. Among the components of the 30 billion they want to borrow, it's a $500 million that is supposed to go to NTA to digitalize NTA. Ideally, NTA should be a cash cow for the government, because it's supposed to be the largest network in Africa, as they claim. So why are we not spending cash from NTA that we have to borrow $500 million to give NTA? It simply means that NTA is being run today, it's not commercially viable. So why can't they go and raise money, put it in a structure they can raise money on their own, like you guys do, or any other station does?
We're told that international financial institutions like IMF and the World Bank is saying that the rate at which we're borrowing, the growing debt, have been described as a death trap, and they're querying these administrations for borrowing more. What do you think is inspiring this particular step on the part of the federal government?
I think the federal government want to do so much. I think maybe they've promised the people so much, especially President Buhari, and he feels that his time is running out. He wants to be able to do so much. But again, you can't do so much and leave us in so much debt to pay. Remember, we people in economics, financial analysts, everybody have been complaining about the debt ratio. But you know what the government keep telling you is the debt to GDP is okay, the debt to GDP is okay. But nobody has looked at the debt to revenue, which is not okay. Until recently, I remember the Minister for Works was saying that he doesn't know how economists are complaining about borrowing, that they are still okay to borrow as much as they can and they will keep borrowing. And it just feels that economists were just saying, but recently in a financial conference meeting, I think in IMF World Bank conference meeting, the Minister for Finance said the challenge we have now is not the debt to GDP, it's the debt to revenue. And that is what we've been talking this way, because you need to be able to pay your debt. If you look at what we are borrowing, let me say the 30 billion that we are borrowing, and out of this 30 billion that we're borrowing, what is our reserve? What's our reserve? Our reserve alone. So that means we are almost borrowing almost like 70 to 80% of our total reserve. And that shows that we don't have the capability to pay. And so what's happening? And remember that what we pay is like monetary or the interest on this debt. The actual amount is still being left for the generation yet unborn. It's just like a man, you have so much house, everything, and you die and your children begin to pay your debt. And you think you left a lot of assets for them. So Nigeria I'm not against borrowing, but are we borrowing rightly? When they started the borrowing plan, I was one of those people that supported that. For the first time, we seem they are tying their borrowing to specific projects, which were good. But now it's becoming a norm for them. Nobody's thinking inwardly, nobody's thinking creatively. Let's just borrow. If there's an area I want to improve, borrow. Like he pointed out the NTA issue. How do you borrow to begin to plan when other organizations don't have such gigantic structure like you have, and they are doing very well with just a little. What does it take to establish, to digitalize the NTA? So why do we have to borrow? Why can't you, like you said, why can't you give them, privatize them and put them in private and let them run privately like other organizations are running, like your organization is running? They become a cash cow to government. Why? Why can't NTA generate their own salary? Why can't NTA begin to become a full business model for the government?
What more, Johnson, do we know about this $30 billion proposed loan? Who is lending us, and how do we intend to pay back? At what interest? Are all of this information in the public clear?
Well, I don't think they've concretized those. What they made is reference to the sources. Among the sources, they said there will be concessionary bilateral loans. A bilateral loan is a loan from one country to another country. They say they borrow from multilateral agencies. Those are finance institutions that are globally owned or owned across different nationalities like IMF. Then they also say they may also access private capital, which is borrowing from the Eurobond market. So you're going to have a mix of borrowing sources. But the basic thing is, back to the question you asked, Muktar, is that why is the government borrowing? Is it just to fast-track development? You have to look at the structure of your economy. And that takes me to what the World Bank told Nigeria, that look, that we need to restructure our economic framework. That without restructure, if we continue with business as usual, the economy will at best grow at 2.1% in 2020 and 2021.
But my concern is even the size of this borrowing. I'm saying that this would mean that we'll be spending way beyond the context of the 2020 budget. You look at the $30 billion and it's way higher than how much we intend to spend for capital expenditure, for instance. So how do we capture this spending within the spending plan?
Okay, normally, which is why, taking that back to what I said earlier, you know, borrowing of that amount is what they call medium-term notes. It's not a one-year borrowing. Okay. When they presented that borrowing plan, it was a 2016 to 2018, which means they would have borrowed in part of it 2016, 2017, and 2018. Now we need to know, which I said, should we really present that in 2020? Are we having a borrowing plan that will run from 2020 to 2022, which I do not think the government is imagining that they want to take $30 billion in a single year. It must be a time frame. But unfortunately, I've not heard that time frame because we keep referring it to it for a period, a past period. So I think it's going to be a staggered borrowing that will fund the gaps. But the questions which are critical is that what are they being borrowed for? Like
let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll be asking some questions as regards where are some monies. For instance, just last month, the Senate decided to approve unremitted 20 trillion naira stamp duty by the Central Bank of Nigeria. 20 trillion naira. That's like double of the 2020 budget. So if we have all deposit banks and financial institutions affected 50 naira per eligible transaction, where all of this money, are they being stored somewhere? Can't we use them to finance the budget? When we return as well, we're going to open the phone lines for your contribution. Stay with us and we'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us this morning. We're looking at the 10.59 trillion naira budget of sustainable growth and job creation. Muktar Mohammed and Johnson Chukwu, thank you for staying the course on the program this morning. All right, so we're looking at how to fund this particular budget. I think it was the Edo State governor who at a point said in the first half of this year we had lost millions of money, in oil theft and all of that. He mentioned 22 million barrels of crude oil production to oil theft. If we're able to curb this menace, many are saying that perhaps we wouldn't even need to borrow in the first place.
We don't even need to go too far to cut those menace. And let's say that it has to do with a lot of security. When you're trying to cut the menace, there's a lot of security implication. You need to spend more also even. But let's just cut our appetite for our luxury alone. Yeah. Let's begin to look at governance as service to the people. Do the legislator need a PA or not PA need a PA? You look at there are some little holes that could be amended and we could solve a problem. How much are we investing in social investment like education and healthcare? Education UNESCO standard is set 26%. A country like South Africa does 26% of education for their people. A country like Nigeria, the budget we are doing just 7% for education. And yet, you won't blame them for saying defense had the highest allocation, which has to do because of the war, insecurity all around, which is, until you have good security before people will come to invest. But let's look at those critical sectors. The government keep telling us about building infrastructure. Nobody is thinking about the manpower that will man that infrastructure. That is the Nigerian people. How equipped are they to be able to take care of this infrastructure? Remember, even the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, that was the issue that Bill Gates saw with it. He said, look, you have this gigantic project, but nobody's looking at the manpower, the people. How many people are you developing? So our budget is all about expenditure, projects. Just like our tax regime is all about revenue, not growth. So we need to begin to change our orientation. The world has gone beyond that. The world is beginning to look at things that can be done easily cheaper than just trying to do things for the name of you want to do something. So our budget should be concise, our budget should be precise, our budget should tell us what it wants to do. We don't have to have so much document, we don't have to go through 6 months, 2 months, if we really know what we are doing. But what we see here is that everybody, the political class, want to score a point with their constituency. The president wants to score a score with the Nigerian people as being one of the best presidents that we've ever had in terms of infrastructural development. So that is the challenge. Until we begin to look at governance as how to help the people, how to empower the people, how to prosper the people, then we'll begin to do things like if it's our own resources we are using, how will we manage it? Until we get to that point, we still have challenges when it comes to budget implementation.
Remember when the president signed the Deep Offshore Amended Act in London, there were a lot of praises back at home, the potential that it will bolster government revenue. There is the Stamp Duty Act. If you make a transaction now over 1,000 naira via the POS, they charge you 50 naira. We are told that all of these are means to bolster revenue for government. There is the anti-corruption arm, where monies are being gotten back. Are we saying that all of these do not have any impact as regards funding the 2020 budget?
For me, the major difference in terms of legislation, or as it relates to revenue source of government, is the Deep Offshore Act. The Stamp Duty Act has been in existence since last
2000
yes.
I think it's 2004.
And then the other element that may be of beneficial interest to the revenue of the government is the finance bill. If it's passed into law and signed into law, you will see some increments, particularly as it relates to value-added tax. But if you look at the facts as they stand today, but for the deep offshore, which I can tell you for certain that nobody can actually estimate exactly how much revenue will come to the government. Remember that nobody is making fresh investments in deep offshore in the country today because we do not have the fiscal framework. The petroleum industry bill, as amended or as broken into several segments, have not been passed into law. Okay, so you don't have fresh investment coming into the country as it relates to that. But let's look at the one that will have impact. I did mention the issue of the finance bill. There's a provision to increase value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%. That's a 50% increase. But what impact will it have on the federal government revenue? Last year, 2018, total federal government revenue from value-added tax was only 147 billion naira. If you increase it by 50%, you're going to have something at best like 220 billion naira. Would that 70 billion or 72 billion increase compensate for the increase in budgetary allocation? Last year, total government revenue was only 3.86 trillion naira. Total expenditure last year was 7.5 trillion naira, leaving a gap of about 2.8 trillion naira shortfall, which had to be borrowed. Now, this year, half of this year, the federal government has only generated 2.04 trillion naira. Okay, given that the changes you're going to see will come from VAT, okay, which is the new additional income source. What will propel government revenue to grow from 3.86 trillion naira we had last year to about 8.15 trillion naira they are budgeting this year? In the last 4 years, average federal government revenue had been 3.12 trillion naira. So the possibility that you grow to 8 trillion naira is almost very weak. The challenge will be that as it stands today, we don't have the revenue profile to fund the budget. And if you don't, you have to resort to borrowing. But even the gap you will have is such you cannot really borrow it.
That's all right. Let me just hold you shortly. We'll join shortly a live broadcast, the passing out parade where the President, Muhammadu Buhari, will be at the second regular course of the Police Academy. The show continues right in the studio, and we'll also get to show you the full content of the program on our repeat broadcast. I understand that George is online right now, calling in from Ikeja. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Ifemi.
Glad to have you. Please go ahead with your contribution.
And good morning to the experts in the studio.
Good morning, George.
Ifemi, I am not so concerned about the cycle of a budget as much as I am concerned about the budget itself. Whether it is from September to September or from January to December, it really doesn't matter. But what is in the budget itself? I thought a situation where lawmakers bloat the budget for their own sake has gone. But the current National Assembly is doing the same thing. What I would like to see, I would like you, Nifemi, please employ your editorial team. Change the narrative of budget implementation in this country. I want a situation where the last budget that was made for the country is discussed at the end of the cycle of that budget. We budgeted for this, we budgeted so money for this and for this project. How far? How did it go? How much was allocated and how was it spent? That's what the people are interested to see. Every year, we see experts coming to analyze budget, but they don't analyze the outcome of any budget cycle. I want you, as a TV station of the people, to please change the narrative. Good morning.
Thank you, George, for your contribution. I think as of October this year, the Minister of Finance was saying that they had implemented close to 58% of capital expenditure of the 2019 budget. We'll get to all of that subsequently, but let us quickly look at the content of the statutory transfers and whether or not we are placing money in the right pockets. So the National Assembly increased it from, I think, 550 something billion to 560. Its own particular National Assembly budget was increased from 125 billion to 128. Now, when you compare that figure to 110 billion for the judiciary, 37 billion for the Northeast Development Commission, 44 billion for basic health care, 111 billion for Universal Basic Education Commission, 80 billion for the NDDC. Do you agree that the National Assembly is taking a little bit much more comparative to other relevant places where money should go to?
Of course, yeah. And that is not, that is excluding their projects, that they are excluding the renovation project. By the time you add that to the project, then you realize that a chunk of the budget have gone to the National Assembly, which maybe that's the agreement they have, that to return back the budget to January to December, or maybe that's why they didn't do due diligence. Maybe that's why they didn't call for public speech. Public opinion about public presentation of the budget. But what else can we do? That we need to really get back to the constitutional matter of who is in charge of who. Is it the executive that has the power to increase, or the legislators have the power to increase? Is it the legislator power to just supervise? We need to get to that point. That's when we begin to make sense to us. But as it stands now, it looks like if they have the power to do whatever they want to do, and in as far as even having the power to approve their own budget or increase their own budget and decrease other people's budgets. So it's a constitutional issue that the goodwill the current president has. If you want to embark upon it, I think he might just be successful.
Well, I'm wondering how that can be tampered with, because the constitutional issue has to go through the National Assembly itself. But let's take Okorafo's call from Arochukwu in Abia State. Good morning, Okorafo.
Good morning, Mr. Newton. Good morning, Mr. Johnson, and good morning, Mr. Muktar. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Honestly speaking, gentlemen, see, I don't know why Nigerian budget security takes the lion's share every year. That security aspect of it covers the bushes, where all the uniformed men will be following them one by one, whereas the mass is just on their own. You see, I don't know. Whereas health and education, that matters just like that. Look at the education aspect of Nigerian system. The basic education they are talking about, how many states will you go? You see the federal government establishing this UPEP and the next, where they have all those facilities. And it's still like that. Every year they will be talking about crime, this, crime, that, and the masses are supposed to benefit from it. They are not benefiting. So now you talk about our higher institutions. You see what is happening between ASO and the federal government. All this is not target on what? On money. Money. And nobody's talking about. If you go to Nigerian universities, look at the facilities. Go to Soka, what is that? Nnamdi Azikiwe hall that they built in 1960s that are supposed to be that accommodate over 1,000 students. The whole building have not gone down. You go to, is it Port Harcourt, or you come to Unijos, they are permanent. Thank God that they are moving. You come to Puto, the same story. You go to Benin, Nevada, people are complaining. Education sector, what is happening? Is it that we don't have that interest of it? That is why I used to tell people that our major problem we have in Nigeria today is 5 things: illiteracy, our hunger, poverty, frustration, and name them. Now, this issue of this illiteracy is a major problem which we don't want to address as a country. Because if we have seen what is happening in America today, how they are following the process, because they are learned and they are educated and they are following the procedure. But here you come to Nigeria, everything abracadabra. Now, you ask us, I want to ask from Mr. Muktar. Some parastatals in Nigeria today, they do not exhaust their budget. There are some ministers that they were talking about, they have, I saw the National Assembly, that they have over 500 million unspent. Now, ask me, does it mean there was no things that are supposed to use that money? And at the end of the day, who is the money? We have less than 2 weeks to go by December. Who takes that money? Now, what are they going to do with the money? Is it that the money they just come direct on? When I say Mr. Muktar, when I'm not, they just take 20 million. Yeah, Mr. Chukwu take 20 million. Is that what is going to happen? Thank you very much. Have a blessed day in Lagos.
Thank you very much for your call. So there's been call for there's what they call the zero-based budgeting.
No, they return back. I think, you know, we had issues about before now that once money not spent was being diverted by the directors. I mean, remember the case of the then Minister of Health issue. So during the Obasanjo, I think, no, during the Yaradua regime, he came up with the plan that once money is not spent after the year that it must be returned back to the treasury. But we've not heard so much about that because, like Mr. John Chukwu said, sometimes this project runs not maybe 5 years, but let's talk about the Lagos Ibadan or most of it's capital projects. So sometimes they will still say, okay, let's still continue, it's still part of the project, and at the point when the budget were not passed on time, those projects cannot just be abandoned. But I think now that we have a budget plan of January to December, any money that is not spent as by December 31st may eventually be returned to the government coffers.
Joshua called in from Iriwole in Ogun State. Good morning, Joshua.
Okay, good morning, Nathan.
Good morning.
And good morning to your guests.
Good morning.
I think we should break this myth, or let me say this idea of a budget has to be passed in 6 months, and that is when a thorough job is done. I think all those things are just political. These are politicians. I want to see, I want to believe that there was a face put in the public in passing this budget, that our senators and all that sat together continuously and they passed the budget in 2 months. That's okay. This idea that it has to be 6 months before you pass a budget is fake. They should stop deceiving us. If you like, stay 1 year. All those things about 6 months were corruption reading, negotiations, below the table, this thing, and all that. So a budget is not a perfect document. Even when it is passed, it will still be worked on. So if we have it within 2 months, that's okay. Or let's say the 1 year cycle now is predictable. Let's go on with that and have a conversation around how exactly is our money spent.
All right.
I want a situation, my own take for your guest, please, is this. We have situations in Nigeria where budgetary allocations are made to projects and nothing is done. You won't find anything. Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, we had it in budget 2 times previously. That road was not touched. So that situation should be looked at. The level of corruption killing our country is about how we spend our money. It is not about the allocation and all that. There's just too much of corruption. So we should focus on are we really putting the money where we need it to be? If we are doing that, then we'll be making the progress, and progress will be seen. So Thank you very much. I appreciate what they're saying.
Thank you very much for your contribution. We'll join that live broadcast now, where the president is going to definitely. We'll bring the details of all of that. I can't get the conversation right now, but let's return to our conversation here in the studio. Perpetually, year after year, we've seen a situation where capital expenditure has always been lower to recurrent expenditure. This is a feat that states like Lagos and even Kaduna seem to have achieved in the past years. How long will it take us to begin to spend more? And the way it happens is, it is the capital expenditure that is not implemented. You always have 100% of fund times for the recurrent expenditure.
Okay, if I take that question, I want to share my views on the issue of adjustments to the budget. The budget is what they call Appropriation Bill. It's an executive bill sent by the executive arm of government and National Assembly. A bill is an instrument that is sent to the National Assembly to pass into law, to legislate on. So I believe that as long as it's an executive bill, as long as it's an appropriation bill, it should be subject to review and possible adjustments by the National Assembly. Otherwise, it is not a bill. So what you are saying, National Assembly, this is our projections, just stamp it. And you have talked about issue of rubber stamping. I believe any bill, whether it's executive bill or legislative or members bill or public bill, is subject to review by the lawmakers.
But why do they always review it upwardly?
You see that, well, like when I spoke,
that's why Nigerians raise eyebrow.
Yes, when I spoke earlier,
and they usually increase it, but their own particular money. They always add to
when
it.
I spoke earlier, I said the total recurrent expenditure of the government actually decreased. The projected recurrent expenditure actually decreased from 4.88 trillion naira to 4.84 trillion naira. Now back to your question, which is why is the capital expenditure component always the one that underperforms, that is not implemented? There's what you call non-discretionary and discretionary expenditure. A non-discretionary expenditure is an expenditure you must incur, whether you make the money or not, among which is the government salaries and wages. Whether it's raining or sunny, as the days pass by inflation of time, the government will have to pay salaries.
Let me hold you for a minute. I understand that Yaqob from Dr. Mo has been waiting. Hi, Yaqob.
Yeah, Mr. Good morning.
Good morning. You have the floor now.
Good morning to Mr. Muktar and the other gentlemen in the studio.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, I totally agree with your guests this morning. Both of them have already done the justice to this topic. But the only place I have problem with this budget issue is this. Although one of your guests have already mentioned it earlier, as the Mr. President will send a budget to the National Assembly, for example, and they send almost 7.something trillion to the National Assembly. And then before they send it back to the President, they will jack it up to 10, 12, as it may be. The only issues I have is this. I think someone needs to go to the court to ascertain who have the capacity or ability or who to increase the budget or who to pass the budget. Why am I saying that is this? The National Assembly, I don't have the right to increase our budget. Who do the feasibility study of the other things they add into that budget? Because why are you? They will just dash it up, and then we don't know what type of the contract they increase it to, and then who do the feasibility? That is why I have issue with them.
That's
because
right.
we cannot continue going like this. Someone needs to put the call to ascertain are they have right or not. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Yaqob, for your contribution. So you're saying that whether we make money or not,
Yes.
we have to spend on recurrent expenditure. Perhaps this value or this amount is bloated, because how do you begin to spend more than what you have? Or am I mistaken here?
It might not be bloated. It might not be bloated. Remember now, let's look at the salary and wages.
Because if you have a business, for instance, you don't pay salaries beyond your capacity.
Yes,
It's
you
not
don't.
that you cut down the number of you don't have a business that is giving you 10 million and then your wage bill is 30 billion. That's not a business.
You see what the government has made themselves a social institution, a political institution whereby they need to give people so that people will feel what they are doing. I think that has been a problem, not only with this government, every other government that has come in. So the problem is actually a Nigerian problem where in the civil service, they want to continue to collect what I call cheap money, handout money.
Political settlement and the rest.
Political settlement and all the rest. So it doesn't really go well for the nation. But sometimes you ask what else could they have done, because there seems to be no money anywhere. And when you talk about some of this expenditure being jacked up or being reduced, remember that we're looking at the national minimum wage. No matter what the amount they put there, it has to go up when you start paying 13,000 naira per hour. So
are we in a fix as a nation?
Well, as a nation, economically, we're in a fix. That's why we need to fix it.
We have to go now, gentlemen. 8.1 trillion is the amount the federal government has estimated for the 2020 revenue. Oil revenue put at 2.6, non-oil tax revenue is 1.8, other revenues 3.7 trillion. How feasible is meeting revenue projections in the new year?
You know, like I said earlier, it's going to be a difficult task to meet the budget. Last year, total revenue was to the federal government was only 3.86 trillion naira. We budgeted for 7.12 trillion naira last year. This year, nothing has materially changed apart from the Finance Bill and the Deep Offshore Act. So they are not likely going to have the effect of increasing the government revenue from about 4 trillion naira to 8 trillion naira. That is double of the revenue. So for me, that's not feasible. But just to cap on the issue of non-discretionary expenditure, your debt service of 2.24 trillion naira you paid last year is not discretionary. Whether you make money or not, you have to pay the interest to those you have borrowed money from. So the government had built a recurrent expenditure profile of about 7 trillion naira. And that, given that your revenue is has never been up to 4 trillion naira. So you're dealing with a shortfall of at least 3 trillion naira. And as long as you do not increase your revenue, or you do not borrow, you will not have any headroom for capital expenditure. So the capital expenditure is what we call discretionary. It's only when you have made those obligations that you can't avoid that you can now begin to.
Gentlemen, we have to go now. I think you have left me more confused than I was before the beginning of this program. So it looks like it will take a miracle for all of these issues to be solved.
No, it won't take a miracle. It's just, like we said.
It looks like we have to keep borrowing to be able to.
No.
And which is actually what we should have discussed. What's the way out? Their expenditures of the government are not necessary.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, the issue of subsidy on premium motor spirit, PMS. We're spending about 2 trillion naira.
But that would mean Nigerians will have to pay more.
What is more critical to Nigerians? Is it to have better quality education, a more inclusive educational system, better health care, better goods, good roads, or to have a lower price of
why I might not agree with that is that the ordinary Nigerian will say, what am I benefiting from government? That's the only thing I can benefit, and that is the truth, because they don't have good road, they don't have power. Then secondly, again, nobody's even sure about this subsidy stream. Precisely how much I will pay for.
We're going to have to continue this conversation some other time, but I must say a big thank you to Muktar Mohammed, stockbroker, financial analyst. Thank you for coming today.
A pleasure.
Johnson Chukwu, CEO, Carry Asset Management Limited, an economist and financial analyst. It's fantastic having you on the show this morning.
My pleasure.
All right, we are done, and we'll be back tomorrow, God willing, with another one. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. God bless Nigeria.